week. All right, it's that time of the year. You're making that playoff push. I figured I might throw some quarterback names out there because it's particularly important in my case this week. I am playing an opponent who also is in need of a quarterback. He has Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is on bye. I am currently streaming Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is on bye.
Yeah, well, he also has like Drew Brees and freaking 7 other quarterbacks and 10 defenses.
Okay. Well, there are teams out there who don't have those quarterbacks on their bench, and they have Patrick Mahomes, and they need someone to stick in. All right.
You just said stick in.
Yeah, I did. So, if you are brave enough
Really?
to
Grade
to
school.
go into the flames of the mountain, if so to speak, if you are brave enough like Frodo to go into the mountain and stick your hands deep into the molten lava that is Jameis Winston, you just might
Don't do
strike gold this week. He's going to Atlanta, guys, who have put up back-to-back impressive defensive performances. This isn't a matchup I'm particularly excited about, but when you have receivers like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I mean, you're throwing the ball all game long. You got to take a shot. Atlanta, more often than not this year, has been a bad defense. I don't know what this fire lit under their asses all of a sudden, whether or not they're just in love with Dan Quinn as a team or what. But, you know, I got two other names here that I'm going to mention, but you could do worse than Jameis Winston this week. You also have Mr. 4 touchdown, Sam Darnold, taking on the Oakland Raiders this week. A weaker defense when it comes to the pass. I'm just saying they're also coming
Pass
off
rush
of
is there for Oakland.
Yes, they did their work against Rivers on a short week, and they just showed Ryan Finley who's boss. But we'll see. Sam Darnold has some weapons, and he's improving. That Washington game was a get right game, and if you need a quarterback, if you got to stick someone in there, you can do worse than Sam Darnold versus Oakland. And finally, we're going to talk a guy who was drafted in most leagues this fantasy season, and that's Baker Mayfield. May finally be useful and is available in some leagues. I'm not saying all leagues, but take a look, take a peek ski. Baker Mayfield takes on the Miami Dolphins at home this week. When you've got Beckham, you've got Jarvis Landry, and sneaky play David Njoku making his return this week. We'll see. I mean, Baker Mayfield is definitely someone I'm going to be taking a look at as putting in my lineup, and don't you guys ruin it for me.
I've got a waiver wire pickup for running back.
Tell me who it is.
Do you know who I favored last week that ended up having a nice little stat line?
Yes.
And he signed the day before. Literally 24 hours prior. Bo Scarborough.
Let's start with the Scarborough himself. Mr. Bo of the Detroit Lions took 14 carries for 55 yards last week and a tutty, as Dave likes to say.
Just ran.
They gave him the ball and said, hit the hole, and he did. 14 times, 55 yards, scored you a touchdown, and has a pretty favorable matchup this week when he goes to Washington to take on the Redskins. So I'm just saying, I don't know what that hodgepodge of Ty Johnson and J.D. McKissick and maybe even would they get rid of Paul Perkins yet? Is that the deal?
Yeah, they cut him for Bo Scarborough.
So, yeah, who knows what they're going to do and how they divvy it up. But
it's the Detroit Lions Russian roulette of running backs.
Exactly. You could do worse than Scarborough on the waiver wire this week. I love that we started there. Darius Geis, someone I wanted to bring up, is available in looks like at least half leagues on ESPN right now. They are in that same game taking on the Detroit Lions, who have a pretty weak defense overall. On the rush defense, I mean, they've been banged up front. I think Snacks Harrison is going to play. But, I mean, then you've got other guys in and out. You got Hand and
there was a ton
Robinson
of Detroit players that got injured in that Dallas game.
Yeah.
In the last, 5 minutes, they were dropping like flies.
So, in a game where, I mean, Adrian Peterson started the game. That's why Darius Geis only had 7 carries. But, I mean, took 7 for 24 and then had that 45-yard touchdown reception. So, it definitely seems like with the Redskins committed to Haskins for the rest of the season, they want to evaluate their young talent. And they're going to turn to Darius Geis, I've got to believe. So if he's available, go pick him up. Last, certainly not, but not least, the rushing leader from last week, Mr. Jonathan Williams of the Indianapolis Colts. Marlon Mack has already been ruled out for this upcoming matchup at Houston Texans, who, a pretty good defense, kind of middle of the pack type defense. And I'm not sure who I feel more confident in playing if I'm going to pick up an Indianapolis Colts running back this week, whether it's Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Williams, maybe even Jordan Wilkins is still in the conversation. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly his injury status is right now. I think he's expected to play. But with Williams looking so explosive last week, you could take your shot on him, or if you feel more comfortable in PPR leagues with Nyheim Hines, I mean, he did also do some damage, and he had a touchdown last week as well. So there are your waiver wire running backs. You got the combination of Hines and Williams for Indianapolis, who, I mean, that offensive line is so good. I feel like you could stick a number of running backs back there and be successful with what the Colts have built up front, initially for Andrew Luck and now for Jacoby Brissett to enjoy. Bo Scarborough and Darius Geis at running back. Moving on to the wide receivers on the waiver wire, we're taking a look at Russell Gage in Atlanta, who only had 2 catches last week, but is taking on the Buccaneers at home. The Buccaneers, I believe, are the 31st ranked pass defense. So Russell
it's like
Gage
is taking over that Sanu position for the Falcons. Ever since he left, he's been a big target for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, and this does kind of hinge on the health of Austin Hooper, who I believe is actually getting in some limited practice work already. Mm-hmm. So if Hooper plays again, then Gage becomes a little bit less appealing as far as targets go. And then you've got James Washington in Pittsburgh. I mean, Juju went out last week with the concussion. Deontay Johnson's been banged up. So when the Pittsburgh Steelers take on Cincinnati this week, James Washington is someone you might be able to stick in your lineup and have success with. He only had 3 catches last week, but does have a little bit of chemistry there with Mason Rudolph.
It depends if Rudolph doesn't throw 4 interceptions instead.
Exactly. Rudolph has been a real roller coaster ride for Pittsburgh fans
or
this
doesn't
year.
Try to, take defensive ends' helmets off and get bashed in the head with his own and then told everybody, oh, I'm a victim. Poor me. Feel bad for me.
Deebo Samuel has 2
honestly,
100-yard.
I think if I was Mr. Rooney, I would just cut him. Just cut him. Like, that dude's just a big moron. He's the type of dude that will sink your franchise if you put the keys in his hand. He's the type of kid, you put the keys in his hands to the car, and he continually will purposely take the wrong turn and drive it into a wall and then get out and blame the wall for being in the wrong spot. Well, I don't know why that wall was in my way.
Samuel has back-to-back 100-plus yard performances and is now going up against the Green Bay Packers, who certainly aren't an ideal matchup. But if Kittle doesn't play, much like Russell Gage with his situation in Atlanta, if George Kittle does not play, and again, if Emmanuel Sanders especially does not play, Deebo Samuel is a very appealing name available in half of leagues right now to just stick in your lineup and enjoy. The last name I want to bring up, guys, because it kind of hinges on the health of Tyler Lockett, is Josh Gordon for the Seattle Seahawks. We saw this past week, only had 2 catches, but big-time catches on 3rd down when they truly needed to get a first down. They needed a clutch catch. Mm-hmm. They turned to Josh
to the veteran.
Gordon. Yeah, so he's kind of a flex shot play if Lockett does play, which right now Pete Carroll is saying he does expect Lockett to play against the Philadelphia Eagles this upcoming week. But especially if Lockett does not play, if there's any sort of setback this week at practice or something like that, I love me some Josh Gordon with Russell Wilson looking like an MVP, certainly favorite so far, chucking the ball around against a vulnerable Philadelphia secondary. You can do worse than Josh Gordon on your waiver wires this week at wide receiver. And I will burn through some tight end names real quick. Ryan Griffin, you should already have because I'm talking about him for weeks. Jacob Hollister takes on Philadelphia, and Noah Fant for the Denver Broncos had 4 catches this past week, so it wasn't just a one-week wonder. He did actually take 4 catches for 60 yards this past week and gets the Buffalo Bills. So there you have it.
Damn it to hell, the Denver Broncos. 20-0 at the half. Run the damn ball. Philip Lindsay was destroying it. I'm sorry, I have to vent here. 20-0.
I was listening to that game on the radio and almost didn't believe the guys who were calling it when they said that Mike Zimmer called the timeout.
Yep, at the end, he's the one who called the timeout, and they would have only been able to get one playoff. That was it.
And from the sounds of it, they were scrambling. They were panicked. They didn't know what to do. They were hurrying to the line. Should have spiked it, several seconds before that. And the Vikings give them 2 more chances, essentially, to score. Goes off the receiver's hands on both occasions, and the Vikings pull off yet another miracle.
Yeah, that wasn't pulling it off. That was the Broncos shooting themselves in the foot. Anyway, what about Dawson Knox at tight end?
Yeah, Dawson Knox,
I
let's
picked
show
him
some
up
love.
off waivers the last 2 weeks.
I've been hyping him up for weeks.
Without Kittle, and he has done very nicely the last 2 weeks. I don't know if it's sustainable in your opinion or not, but yeah, he was definitely a good streaming tight end the last 2 weeks for me.
He's been fine.
Sorry, go ahead, Dillon.
He's been fine. The only thing I don't like, and we'll get into this a little bit more in the trade away segment, is Buffalo's remaining schedule is pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Aha. Okay. All right,
Depending on Josh Allen.
You might as well get right into that if you don't have any other waiver wires.
I do not. Those are all my names for this week. Let's get into.
I got one.
Hit me.
Okay, go ahead.
Since O.J. Howard tried to do a little basketball move in the, did you guys see that catch where he tried to catch the ball, spin him around his back, ended up coming out and then having an interception?
No, I missed that one.
Go type in O.J. Howard behind the back football move, and it failed. Caused an interception for Jameis. Ever since that happened, Cameron Brate had a big day. I would choose to go try and find Cameron Brate if you can find him.
Well, there you have it.
Okay, moving on.
A lot of targets swung from that.
You're done talking now, Dave. Stop. Shut up.
Arians doesn't play around if you mess up in his office.
Zip it. I will mute you.
No. Okay, I can unmute myself.
No. You can't mute yourself. No.
I said I can unmute.
Oh, damn it, Jay. This is a democracy.
I know.
This is not a democracy. This is the angry little man with the controls.
The people will fight.
I'm not going to disagree about the angry little man.
Yes, that's right.
Moving into
trades.
This is our trade segment for the week, folks. When we talk about the trade segment now, obviously, check your trade deadlines, see if this is even worth listening to for you. Obviously, if you want to listen for the sake of Dynasty, but these trades are more meant for redraft. Obviously, I would not trade these names for what I'm talking about in a Dynasty league. Again, I'll repeat, this is for redraft only. Now, when I talk about these guys to trade for, I'm talking about guys who I believe have nice setup as far as remaining schedule goes, and you shouldn't have to trade too much for because they've either been disappointing so far or they're not very big names. So I know I brought up this particular player before, but I'll bring him up again. Odell Beckham Jr. for the Cleveland Browns has been a total disappointment this season, as has Baker Mayfield. However, great remaining schedule for him and Jarvis Landry, who I'm also going to recommend trading for. Remaining schedule is at home against Miami, at Pittsburgh, which, Pittsburgh's been tough, but then at home against Cincinnati, a get-right game, at Arizona, who's been weak on defense, and then for your championship week, it's a tough week, but luckily it's at home versus Baltimore. So you've got a few nice games that you can squeeze in. OBJ or Jarvis Landry. OBJ has 22 targets the last 2 games, so they are still throwing the ball his way plenty. It's just turning that into production. And then you have Jarvis Landry, who scored a touchdown in 3 straight weeks. Another player I think you should trade for, it's a combination of players because they're on the same team, is either Josh Gordon or DK Metcalf. We just mentioned Josh Gordon and how important he was to the Seattle victory last week. Very clutch catches, and I believe after getting familiar with the playbook and Russell Wilson, he's only going to get better in that offense. And DK Metcalf, obviously these two, their value depends on the health of Tyler Lockett. If Tyler Lockett cannot play, then it's an even better deal. But I don't think you should have to give up much to get guys like Josh Gordon and DK Metcalf. And we already spoke about how much success Russell Wilson is having as a passer this year. I mean, I believe it's something ridiculous like 23-2 touchdown to interception rate.